Stephanie's here. Are there any other mods? I didn't actually contact any others specifically, which I think is a bit unfair. But Stephanie's here, quite a few members. SMK Walensky, I know you're very interested in this case, and thanks very much to you for all the updates you've sent me. A lot of them were happening, like, especially at the end. A lot of news is coming through suddenly and quickly, and you were definitely very on the ball with that. So thanks a lot for that. Zircon says, I can't understand why she called 911. Well, that's what we had to talk about and to think about. There's a poll up. If you haven't voted on it, make sure you do. I see we're approaching about 100 votes. Only 2% of you say that Casey White loved Vicky. And I think it's interesting that 44% said maybe a bit of both. So I think there's a bit of love, but also a bit of, using someone for convenience, using someone, put it that way. So it's not strictly speaking true to say that you voted that he didn't love her, just that there's a, what do they call it? A hidden agenda, right? But I think one can kind of equally ask, right, we are here to sort of say, what was she thinking? And also kind of do a deep dive around quite a few things that add kind of a very interesting layer to the story. So the other thing is, did she love him? And if so, was she using him in a way? And you might say that's absurd. How can she be using him? But there is an aspect to that. What does she want out of her relationship with him? And although I think he needed her a lot more specifically, to escape and to, avoid paying his dues, she, I think, was using him in a similar way as well. I think it's totally different. She was using him a lot less, and certainly not kind of in a criminal way. He's using her in a criminal way, specifically because of her skill set and position in the jail. By the way, do you guys know the difference between jail and prison? Let's have a look. Do you guys know the difference between jail and prison? Donna McLeod, good to see you. Christy Laura, welcome to the VIP lounge, new member, good to see you here. I see Cotton Star's also here. Cotton Star actually sent me a photo of Vicky as a young woman, black and white. It's quite interesting that there are very few photos of her. It raises the question, was she on social media? Gathering place, good to see you, and great answer. Jail is a temporary place to put you until court. Absolutely right. So jail is where you go when you're awaiting trial, right? So when you're after you've been sentenced in court, you'd serve your long-term sentence in prison, right? So the Vicky was a corrections officer at a jail, so all her prisoners were sort of awaiting trial prisoners. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume that Casey was quite a long-serving or a long-waiting trial felon. If you had to look at all the prisoners in that particular jail, I sort of wonder how long many of them were there. The fact that he was there 2 years seems to me to be quite a long time, doesn't it? It's quite a long time, 2 years just waiting to go to trial. And he obviously wanted to avoid it. And the more time went on, the more he wanted to avoid it, and maybe saw a way to avoid it. Does that make sense? So jail is for awaiting trial prisoners. Prison is where you go after you've been sentenced. Prison is where you serve the long-term kind of sentence. Stephanie gives Gathering Place kind of a high five, says, wow. Gathering Place says, I actually worked inside prisons in California. Okay, well, there you go. Choice says, jail is the holding cell. I mean, just also, thank you, Choice. I've seen you in the comments sort of standing up for me in certain instances. And I kind of appreciate that. So thank you for that. I've just seen you come up now and then. So thanks a lot. Susan Becker, good to see you here as well. Lizzie Two Shoes. Oh, Sharon Lynn's also here. Good to see you. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a kind of a deep dive, a couple of things that are that you may or may not know, okay? So some of this comes from an article from the Associated Press, but I've kind of gone through, Christine Charlotte, thanks very much. I've kind of gone through all sorts of sources to put this together. Once we've done that, we're going to deal with this thing of what was she thinking and what is the actual dynamic going on between him and her, but more specifically between her and him. What was she thinking? What is going on? What is the actual thought process? And to answer this question. So let's start. So the way that they were captured is actually thanks to a tip that they got on a Sunday night that led the marshals and the police to a hotel. I was assuming that there was some kind of stakeout, that it wasn't just, I mean, they didn't just, there wasn't just a high-speed chase, that had to come from somewhere. Suppose you could argue, if you didn't know, you could argue that the cops were stationed somewhere and it was like, look out for whatever. Look out for this sort of vehicle. When somebody saw it, that led to a high-speed chase, but that's not what happened. What happened was there was a tip on Sunday night in Evansville, and the tip was actually about this Cadillac, right? The tip was really, let me paint the picture a little bit better. The tip was dealing with the CCTV footage inside the car wash, which the cops initially weren't sure about it. They didn't think it was a stolen vehicle. But then they later, we'll get to how they knew this, but they later saw that there was something to that. So they initially didn't pay too much attention, then they did. And then they saw in that CCTV footage that they saw this Cadillac. They saw this sort of, it's like a bullet gray, maybe even a dark green, but sort of a dark colored Cadillac. And then they realized, okay, we must be on the lookout for that. And what they didn't kind of expect, what they didn't know, first of all, was how long they'd been in Evansville. And number two, they were still in Evansville. So it could have been looking all over Evansville and they were long gone, except that they weren't. In any event, it was from that tip on the Sunday night. So the Sunday night tip, actually there was a tip previous to that, but they only really registered what was going on the Sunday night. So on Sunday night, the marshals were alerted and they then fanned out and they sort of looked around. And sure enough, they found this vehicle in the parking lot, this Cadillac, in the parking lot. I think it was a 411 motel. And from the online descriptions, it sounds, and the media descriptions, it sounds very run down, but it doesn't look too bad. Amy Hall, good to see you. It doesn't look too bad. I'm not quite sure what the color is. It's just sort of a very dark gray, maybe a sort of a green color. yeah, what would you guys say? Dark gray or dark green? But basically just a dark colored Cadillac. Anyway, so you can see it on the surveillance footage. And so Lizzie Tushu is very, very sad. Her whole career, savings, retirement, and now villainized by her own choices. Bullet gray, that's what Zircon says. Okay, so so they look for this vehicle, they actually find it in a parking lot, and so it doesn't necessarily mean it's that vehicle, it could be another vehicle like it, but it ends up being that vehicle, right? And so that's when they set up their surveillance. So there is a stakeout, and the stakeout starts Sunday night. So the US Marshals are checking out this vehicle, and it feels like this could be something, but they don't know. And the very next morning, Monday morning, Vicky comes out of this 411 motel wearing a wig, and she gets into what's described here just as a gray vehicle. And she's in the vehicle with Casey White. This is all information from Marshal Marty Keeley, right? So that's really what did it in the end, is that the tip Sunday night, which is actually a tip that gotten earlier, checking the CCTV, seeing this vehicle, finding the vehicle still in Evansville in this motel parking lot, and then jackpot, Vicky White, they actually see Vicky White coming out the hotel. Now, what's quite interesting is they probably got something like binoculars, and they can zoom in, kind of things, not like they're using the naked eye. And so they can actually probably see Vicky's features, and they recognize her, even though she's wearing a wig. So even though she's in disguise, they recognize her, which shows you it's not a very good disguise, right? That also brings up something else, which I think is quite interesting, is I found the photos that were used in these sort of all points bulletins and all that kind of thing. I found it really like, are you kidding me? So when you look at the photo of Vicky, I don't know how old that photo is of her in a sheriff's uniform, but it looks like it could be 10 or 20 years old. I don't know if you guys saw that. There's another photo of her where she's inside the jail. It looks like she's directing someone to sit on the ground or sit on the bench. And there she looks a lot older, right? Andar says it was very humanizing to hear her voice. I thought the same thing. You get a sense of something from her. It's kind of there's a bit of a southern drawl there. But also, I thought it was quite humanizing to hear his voice. That might sound weird, but I just mean it became definitely clearer to me what he was thinking and what he was doing. I don't know if you guys also felt that when they took him into custody and you heard him, there wasn't really much panic in his voice. There wasn't really much emotion in his voice, and all that. Anyway, so those are the circumstances around that. There were actually quite a few wigs in the vehicle. They found multiple red and blonde wigs. I don't know if the blonde wigs were for him because she's already blonde, but I presume certainly the red wigs were for her. They don't say anything about dark-haired wigs, but presumably. So there were wigs for both of them. That was really their attitude to that. It's quite interesting that they wouldn't dye their hair. Like, why not dye your hair? We don't know for a fact that she didn't, but did he? Can you imagine if he dyed his hair ginger? That would already create kind of a different impression in a way. The other thing, so first of all, there was an overnight stakeout. The second thing is they seem to have spent a huge amount of money in a very short time already. So she'd drawn 90,000 in cash. I think she sold she sold the house for $95,000, which is way below market value. So she was in a rush to sell that. That was already a red flag. But they'd already blown through a heck of a lot of money. And I think some of that money that they'd blown through was buying guns, but also they were buying cars and then abandoning them. Now, if you think about it, how long were they going to be able to buy cars and abandon them, right? Each time you're leaving a chunk of change behind that you can never get back. And so what happens when you've got $20,000 left, then $10,000, what are you going to do? You don't have a job. How are you going to make money? How are you going to kind of stay on the run when the money runs out? So that's kind of an aspect that calls into question this idea of planning and foresight. You know, some people said it was a well-planned thing. I think the breakout of jail was quite well planned. There was even a dry run, but in terms of the whole thing being well planned, I'm not sure if that's the case. And I think there's a reason for that, especially from her side. They seem to do the first part fairly well. So in other words, they seem to, her getting him out and him getting out, and then the first phase, you know, going to the parking lot, already staging a vehicle there, the orange Ford Edge, I think 2007. That part was quite cleverly done, and how she got to work that day, that morning, the morning of the escape, was, I believe she called a friend and said, I think she said she had car trouble, and then the friend came and picked her up, and I've got it here somewhere. I'm just not quite sure where it is. What did she say? Did she say she had car trouble to the friend, or did she give another reason? So anyway, the friend then picked her up, and that is how she got to the jail, and then from there she was able to take the cruiser, which is something that she wouldn't take home. It wasn't her vehicle. S.M. Kowalinsky says the first part was very well planned. After that, it was disorganized and chaotic. After that, it got more and more disorganized, and almost felt like towards the end, because that sort of booked 14 days, 2 weeks in a $50 a night motel. It almost seemed like, okay, what are you guys actually doing? You're on the run, but you're not even running. You're on the run, but you're not doing anything or going anywhere. You could say that's lying low, but why on earth would you lie low in a village? Why not lie low like nowhere, like in a rural setting? You know what I mean? Why would you lie low where there are people around you, the hotel receptionist? I mean, unless you're going to stay in the hotel constantly, but there's also the risk of your car being seen in the parking lot, which is exactly what happened. So wouldn't you want to park not in a parking lot? You know what I mean? Wouldn't you want to go somewhere? And obviously, I think they saw this town, Evansville, as a place where there was unlikely to be much infrastructure in terms of CCTV. And when you look at that car wash, it doesn't look like, it kind of looks quite run down. And so it's like, there wouldn't be CCTV there. Well, there was. The weird thing also is that he didn't even check. Did he actually look around him to see if it was there? Because he could have just pulled in there, looked up, seen the camera, pulled out and driven away, and they would never have seen him. So maybe a little bit laziness setting in there. Life on the lam has suddenly become quite cushy. My girlfriend's paying for everything. We're buying one car after another. It's a roller coaster ride, but ensconced in luxury, and she takes on most of the risk. And you know what I mean. So maybe he got a bit lazy in terms of what was going on. Maybe that laziness is why they sort of were like hanging out in a motel. We don't want to run, it's too much work. Let's just hang out and watch TV and probably have sex. And that's quite an important aspect that I think we need to address in terms of the dynamics. Anyway, let me go on here. What's quite interesting is they legally bought the Ford, the blue, navy blue Ford, the dark blue Ford. That was bought legally, but they still don't actually know how they got the Cadillac. They don't know whether it was stolen or also bought legally, just don't know. I don't know whether that information has come out yet, but certainly at the time that I researched this, they still don't know how they got the Cadillac, which I think is quite interesting. Some people thought they would get a boat. Okay. So, so apparently Casey White told detectives when he was sort of interrogated that they spent a lot of their time holed up in this hotel, a cheap Indiana motel, and what they were doing there, according to him, is they were trying to plan where they were going to go next. I don't know if they had maps or how they were going to do that, but they were going to plan where they were going to go next. But I think besides that, they were doing something else in that motel. What do you think they were doing? And so if you're doing that, do you think there's much thinking going on? Do you think there's much critical thinking and watching the news going on when you're doing those sort of things, right? And it's you must bear in mind he's been in jail for 2 years, so, and he's 36 years old, so there's definitely going to be an appetite from his side for that. In terms of her, she's, I think, effectively single, and she's had a phone conversation type relationship with him. I think a question to ask is it possible that they slept together during his period in jail? Was there like a quickie or some kind of encounter? I think if there was, it probably wasn't very satisfying. You know, it's not like you can take all your clothes off and you've got an extended time. Maybe it's possible that it happened. I think it's just really unlikely. If you accept that it didn't happen, you can imagine that the anticipation in terms of that was quite high. Like, I can't wait to XXX kind of thing, right? I'm just saying, I don't think they would have, if they did have any kind of encounters, that it would be very long and very satisfying. But who knows? We do know they had a phone relationship. The fact that nobody seemed to know that they had a relationship seems to me that they were quite careful. But who knows, if she had such a powerful position there, maybe she could get into certain rooms, but you would also imagine the jail had CCTV all over it, kind of thing, you know, inside. But who knows? Who knows? I'm simply saying that you get the feeling that the time in the motel was kind of like a honeymoon, not only for her, but also for him. And I mean, he did describe her as his wife. Not quite sure what that means, but you kind of, it feels a little bit like it was this honeymoon, and we don't want to go on the run. There's too much work. Let's enjoy our honeymoon, right? That was definitely an aspect to it. The fact that they were on the run, but that they were also in love. Certainly she was. But I don't think you must be too quick to dismiss whatever he felt. For her to be in love, she must have felt some kindness, gentleness, niceness from him. Maybe some of it was manipulation, maybe a lot of it was, but maybe some of it was, wow, she's actually quite a nice person. She's someone I can trust. She's someone I can talk to. She's someone that is kind of attractive, right? In order to do what they were going to do, she also had to trust him. And maybe she didn't have very good judgment, but that had to come from somewhere. there was something going on where they developed a connection and a relationship. And over many, many phone conversations, he had to give up something that showed a side to him that she liked for whatever reason it was. I'm not saying she had good judgment, but it was based on something, right? What I do think seems to show him to be quite callous and quite calculating, besides his criminal history, is that it was specifically mentioned that he didn't seem to show any remorse for Vicky White's death. It says here, Lauderdale County Sheriff Rick Singleton said on Tuesday, that's after, just one day after he was caught, that he didn't show remorse for his lover's death. You don't kind of get a sense, in a way, I don't know, you don't seem to expect it, but you don't see him crying because he knows that she's been shot. You just don't see him kind of emotional. In that body cam footage, he seems pretty unemotional for what's going on. He says something about please check on my wife or something like that, but there's nothing of the kind of distraught, raw emotion that you'd expect given what's just happened. This scary, it definitely was a terrifying experience for her. This terrifying car chase ending in this pretty shocking, car ramming scenario, and even the car sort of rolling. That had to be a pretty jolting experience, and he doesn't seem very emotional, especially compared to her. If you hear her in the 911 call, you can hear that she's kind of freaking out, right? He doesn't seem freaked out at all. He's like, it didn't work. And that's where you kind of get the sense that he's used her. He's had a bit of fun, and it didn't work out. And, not the best ending, but there you go. He's kind of resigned to it. He isn't remorseful. He seems quite psychopathic, but then he is a murderer. Not saying he has no feelings, but he certainly didn't express much. And I think that is kind of a key to what's going on here. At the same time, I don't want to say there's no emotion whatsoever and there's no feelings whatsoever, because I think a big part of this was sex, especially for him. And I think that was going to eventually wear off. I also think sex was a big part of it for her, because we know she went to a sex shop and bought him clothes shortly before the escape. The part, the part involving going to a sex shop, and also the fact that they stayed in this hotel for so long, motel, I think go together. And then I think a key to figuring out their dynamic is the age gap. So that, I think, plays into that whole sexual explosion thing in a much bigger way than had the age gap been a little bit different. So let me ask you guys, do you know what the age difference was between the two? Do you guys know what the age difference was? Bob says, how does she make all the plans with a house, car, and money and not have a plan after the escape? I think they did have a plan, but they were actually in the motel trying to figure it out. You could argue that they'd gotten so far and they'd succeeded, and now they must figure out the rest of it. I think also you've got to sometimes change your plans given what's happening with the police. Did they know it would be so high profile? I think that is something they probably didn't expect. They didn't expect it to be national news, even international news. Jody says 18 years. Yeah, about an 18-year age difference. He is, I think he's 36 years old and she's 54, right? Is that right? I know it's an 18-year age difference. She's 56. There's another woman that he stabbed that was 58 years old. 38 and 56. So, an 18-year age difference. And that is quite a lot. It's not even as though he's 46, like 10 years later, 10 years younger, but almost 20-year age difference. And so it's a little bit maybe awkward to go into it in this way, but if you think of it from her perspective, she's 56 years old. She's actually, retirement is definitely part of her mindset. She's definitely thinking about getting, the end phase of her life, retiring and all that kind of thing. She's 56. She's been single for a while. You must know that if you're in a phone relationship with a prisoner, that there's not an awful lot of real intimacy, real warmth, real companionship. So for 2 years, she's kind of been getting the sort of the scraps. She's not getting what she really wants in terms of intimacy, right? And now there's this thing where, obviously, in her retirement, that's how she's seeing it. In her retirement, she is going to be with somebody, and it's this hot, in her mind, these are what I think she's thinking, this hot, young, much younger, hulking dude, this man's man kind of thing, this guy with tattoos, and he's huge, and he's, this, in a way, and again, it's not what I think, it's what maybe she thought, this awesome big dude, right? And maybe that turned her on. Maybe the fact that he was so big and she was actually relatively much smaller was kind of a turn on, that he was this powerful, masculine, bad boy kind of thing. And in the sexual sense, that for her was quite sort of titillating, whatever. On the other side, I don't know whether he would have found her that attractive, but he may have found her attractive in a different way, as someone that he could trust, someone that was kind, someone that was trustworthy in terms of the whole jail. I mean, did you guys know that she was due to receive an award kind of like a week later? Did you guys know that? That she was due to get, I think, a 5th award for being like this great prison guard. In 2022, she was going to get that award. She was due to get the award that year as well, right? And I think she was going to get the award a week after she retired. That was when it was going to happen. So that kind of makes her kind of exemplary in another way. She's a good person in that sense. She's dutiful, she's trustworthy, she's conscientious, she's got her SHIT together, all that kind of thing. And all of those things would have made her quite an attractive partner for him in two senses. The one is partner in crime, and the other one is someone that would, he's basically going on a road trip with someone, and, that's how much fun they're going to have. But I do think that a big part of this was actually sex without knowing it from her side. This guy is 18 years younger, apparently likes her, loves her, whatever. And, that's, and that I think answers the question, what was she thinking? Well, she wasn't thinking. She was thinking, planning the escape and so on, but the thinking only went so far, and then the fantasy takes over. The thinking only goes so far, and then you don't think anymore because you are fantasizing and you are anticipating and you got these other thoughts going on. So I think the answer is she's a hopeless romantic. She's caught up in this sort sort of sexual thing, and where in love does the sex end and the love start? It's often it's kind of mixed together. The sex makes you feel in love, the love makes the sex also possible in a way. So I think that was really a big part of it. And I think the age gap, certainly for her, made it so much more sort of powerful and exciting, and also not just the age gap, but the fact that he's this big brute, he's this big dude, and she must feel something in terms of that. Compared to the humdrum of retiring and staying with her mom and just basically being alone. So it's basically retiring with this dude, and maybe it's a risk, but it's exciting, or retiring and staying with her mom and ... question mark kind of thing. So that's really what she wanted. She wanted excitement. And I think if you you might you might get caught up in that contradiction where it's this thing of, it doesn't make sense that she has this unblemished sorry, it doesn't make sense that she's got this unblemished record. She's this perfect officer, but then she does this that's completely out of character. Right, that's been the conversation that's been going on over and over again. You really don't know a person and so on. I don't think it is such a contradiction. And what I mean is, from the outside, it may look like she's unblemished and nobody could see this coming. But that is if you didn't really know very well, if you knew her superficially. But there's another side to her, and that is the flesh breathing, heart pumping human being that she is. She's got natural desires like anybody else, and she's not a robot. Her existence, as far as she was concerned, goes beyond being this perfect prison guard who opens doors and who's on time and who never does anything wrong, kind of thing. Who, you know what I mean? Like, she felt like my existence is more than just my job. I'm not just somebody who shows up for work and I do my work very well, and after getting your 5th reward for the same thing, it gets a bit old, doesn't it? I mean, it was so old that she wasn't even interested in collecting the award. In fact, she wasn't even interested in, she was actually interested in putting that whole humdrum life of hers behind her. She may have been good at her job, but was her job really that exciting? Did she love her job? Maybe she liked being liked by her colleagues, but she probably felt like, the fact that she retired at 56 is quite early. So she was in a rush to basically quit her job forever, to leave her job. The thing that was really interesting to her was this relationship she was in. She was connecting to someone. Maybe it wasn't appropriate, but that's what she was doing. The other thing that I think is interesting is the blindness to the type of charges he was facing. He wasn't like facing relatively mild charges like, say, burglary, or relatively mild charges like, I don't want to minimize it, but let's say something to do with drugs. Instead, it's like some of the worst offenses. It's murder. It is, and carjacking and housebreaking and all that kind of thing. And so, how is that? How does that figure into her thinking? Maybe he tells her he's reformed. Maybe he says, I've met you and I want to be a better man and all that crap, which I don't believe, but she must have believed it. Maybe they just don't talk about that very much. They deal with it. She is eventually convinced, and then from then on, she gets caught up on the magic carpet ride kind of thing. His crimes, he was supposed to serve 75 years. He had white supremacist tattoos on him. He participated in a crime spree that was not limited to home invasion. This all happened like in one go. Home invasion, carjacking, killing a dog, even attempting to kill an ex-girlfriend. Casey White allegedly threatened to kill the ex-girlfriend, even his sister. So you kind of get the idea that this guy can maybe be a certain kind of person, and then if you flick a switch, a lot can happen. A lot of destructive activity, maybe associated with being intoxicated, maybe associated with something that's going to trigger him. But certainly think about all of that: home invasion, carjacking, killing a dog, attempting to kill an ex-girlfriend, even his sister. So in September 2020, he was charged with capital murder of the brutal stabbing. So it wasn't just murder, it was a brutal murder of a 58-year-old woman, a woman 2 years older than Vicky. And shortly after the indictment in September 2020, he was moved to Lauderdale County Jail to await trial. And so for whatever reason, he was stuck in jail for almost 2 years, right? And that's when all of this happened. I think it may be a bit of a wake-up call to the authorities that you don't want waiting trial prisoners to be waiting trial for too long, because maybe this can happen. It may also get the system awakened to the idea of, should you have female officers guarding male prisoners? Right, and maybe also vice versa in where there are prisons or jails for women. Something that I think is quite sort of interesting is, I just want to ask you guys, if you were, because I think one's got to kind of get almost into the criminal mind, right? Camille says, I think Camille actually worked in a prison. Camille says, where is that? Camille says, I'm like a lunatic from working there. Are you saying that that's referring to you, or you're referring to how she may have felt? Kat says, maybe they really did love each other. Who knows? I don't think so. I don't think it was genuine from his side. I think there was a certain, not like no love at all, not like nothing, but I think a lot of it was he was using her, and he, maybe enjoyed sleeping with her, but he probably wanted sex anyway. Susan Becker, thanks a lot for that. May says, Nick, how do we stop weirdos from happening at all? I don't know if you mean with that question, how do you stop crime from taking place? I think the answer to that is very simple but very difficult, which is every person needs to be balanced. In other words, you need to be socialized, you need to experience the aspects that you need to experience in a normal way. And that's easier said than done. Sometimes society rejects you. That's the other side with Vicky. This is my personal opinion, but tell me if I'm out of line. The photos you see of Vicky given by the Marshal Service, the sort of the main photos that they show, she kind of looks quite attractive. She looks quite young. But when you see Vicky, the more updated photos of her, I don't find her very attractive. And she's 56, and you kind of got to wonder, all things being equal, what is her love life, or what would her love life have been beyond the jail? What was it beyond the jail? What was it going to be beyond the jail? And so this guy is a promise of something quite, it's like a normal word, but it is exciting compared to what reality is actually offering her, which is really very little. So the dudes that are maybe interested in her are maybe 60 something and retired and heading to old age homes or whatever it is, and she's not really interested in that. And anybody can feel that way. Anyone who's retiring doesn't want to just slow down, get onto a chair and die. They want to live. And that's what she wants. I knew that was going to happen. Am I still on? So I actually just went off mobile data to Wi-Fi. I'm not quite sure why I had it like that anyway. Someone else here said that they thought she probably could fix him. He could fix him. Oh, Camille says I was a prison guard. So there you get the inside look from Camille. By the way, my girlfriend's brother is actually a corrections officer as well. She gets a bit more information there. But you can imagine if it's unpleasant in a prison or a jail, and it has to be. I mean, it's not supposed to be a honeymoon, right? If it's unpleasant in jail for the prisoners, like it's not fun, then what is it like for the jailers? Is it really the best place to work? Your surroundings are, bars and walls and kind of the scum of the earth. So it can't be a lot of fun, really can't be a lot of fun. You don't escape jail because it's a nice place to be. And in a weird way, she was escaping as well. She was escaping her life prematurely as well. Not because, you might say she liked working because she got these awards. She did her job well. I don't know if it means that she loved her job. So the humdrum and the whole thing, Shawshank Redemption, like, do I really want to be here for the rest of my life? Do I really want to be until somebody else says I can leave? No, I want to go out on my own terms. I want to go out on my own terms. And that's what he decided, because he would have died in jail, and now I think he will. If he's serving 75 years, I doubt whether he's going to ever come out. So he wanted to leave on his own terms, and she also kind of did. She also kind of she didn't want to go into retirement the way that it otherwise would have been. She wanted to have this adventure. And so it was 10 or 11 days. And if you could talk to her now and say, was it worth it? Maybe she would say yes. Maybe she'd say, those were the best 10 days of my life. It was worth, every second of it was worth it. I don't know. But I think some of you guys who know me know that I went on a 3-day mountain bike thing to a place called Prince Albert. And the of that 3-day thing was to live, was to have an adventure and to feel alive and to enjoy life. And of course, I fell and broke a rib. And so it's not like I nearly died, but in this pursuit of trying to live life, you tend to take risks. To enjoy life, you tend to need to have courage and to go somewhere else and to do something new. And there's risk involved in that. And I'm just saying, in the pursuit of more life, there's death. Death is hanging there. Anywhere where there's risk, there's potential reward, but there's also potential pain and heartache and all that kind of thing. And that's something all of us have got to look at ourselves. You've got to decide, what is the answer to wanting to live more? And then also, is what I'm doing well advised? Am I caught up in a fairy tale? Am I realistic about this? Because in a way, the whole thing about living more isn't necessarily rational, and it isn't necessarily about being realistic. It's actually about the opposite. It's about almost taking all that the strictures of being realistic that keep you in a job or in just your humdrum life. And you want to cast them aside. You want to transcend that by, in a way, enjoying being unrealistic, right? That's why people go and climb Mount Everest, to be somewhere that is unreal, somewhere that is, really different. Camille says the best way to sum it up is, the subculture exists, but when you're fully immersed in it, it's unbelievable. Alicat says loneliness could drive you to do many things. That's also a really good point, is that she probably felt lonely. And what's the opposite of lonely? In a way, what's the opposite of loneliness is sex, in a way, where you physically join with another person. And when you do that, do you feel lonely? Sometimes you can, but in your fantasy, you might think definitely not. Camille says, I used to tell the inmates my something was Barbie doll. They thought I was a weirdo. Okay. Stephanie says, I don't think it's uncommon for women to think they can change someone. Yeah. Terry says, how did he convince her that his dreams were her dreams too? I think you've got to see it. What they have in common is this yearning to escape. And although it's totally different, they're coming from different sides. I mean, of the prison bars, right? He's behind them, she's in front of them, but they nevertheless both want to escape that life. Both of them equally want to escape that life. And I think she said something about wanting to go to the beach, which is basic escapism. I mean, I went to the coast not long ago. It's also, I want a change of environment. I want to be somewhere else, right? And I was actually it was quite impractical because the roads had been badly rained on. Someone said it was the worst in his living memory. The roads were so bad, it's never been that bad. So in your mind, you think, wow, I really want to go to the sea. And when you actually go there, the roads are in this terrible condition. Were you realistic in your planning, kind of thing? So I'm just saying, what we're seeing here, I want to apply it back to us, where you say, in this attempt to escape, are you running towards disaster, or are you being practical about it, right? So I do want to ask you guys, because I think it's quite important to try and think about the criminal mind and also anticipate to some extent the criminal mind. So I'm going to ask you guys a kind of a weird question. You know the route that they went. You know that they basically went north, right? From Florence, Alabama. They went north and they ended up in Evansville, Indiana, but they were basically going in a northerly direction, right? Let's say you are in that situation. You are Vicky, and it's let's say May 3rd, right? And you could let's say you could get a call from one of us saying, this is what's going to happen. If you stay where you are, this is what's going to happen. In other words, someone could tell you the future. So in other words, you can't stay there for a week or 2 weeks. What are you going to do in terms of what could be potential strategies to continue being on the run? So let's just hear what some of you guys say. In terms of what could they theoretically have done in terms of where could they have gone from there had they left earlier? What do you think would have been good decision making? What do you guys say? I don't know if you guys have looked at maps and try to think, think what they would have done. Sharon says drive. I agree. I think they should have done a lot more driving in the beginning. Terry Dean says west, less populated. I agree with that. Becky Hill says Canada. Did Zista says, I don't think she shot herself. Okay. There's a little bit of uncertainty about that. There was actually some uncertainty whether she was driving or not as well, which is quite interesting. Bear in mind, if the authorities believe that he shot her, then he'd be charged with that. He hasn't been so far. Also, you'd expect there to be blood on him, right? Julia says you can walk across the Canadian border. Azza says head to New York. Shannon says I think she could have bought an RV and did non-stop driving straight to Mexico. A lot of you say Canada. Amy says they obviously didn't plan properly. Stephanie says, don't they need passports to travel into Canada? Anna says leave the country. Becky says kept going, maybe Mexico. Brianna says buy a large van. Alicat says, what would be his motive for shooting her? It could be something like a pact between them where she said, if we get caught, shoot me. It could also be that he wants to take her money, could be something like that. Maybe the fact that there's not so much money left means some of the money's been stashed somewhere and that he wants that money. Okay, so what I think is maybe quite interesting is I would have said head west. So make a very sudden turn due west and head towards the sort of barrenness of New Mexico and that sort of thing, Colorado, the emptier areas, the mountainous areas. On the one hand, there's less people there. On the other hand, your vehicle is going to stick out in an empty space a lot more than in a heavily populated space. But your problem is because it's so high profile, you need to get away from people. That's the thing that they didn't seem to click. They needed to get away from people. So you need to go to where nobody is, wherever that is. So I think there were two possibilities for a good strategy from where they were. The one is head west, and the other one is go back the same way. So in other words, they've gone all the way up there, right? They've gone. The best predictor of the future is past behavior. So using that psychology, you could say, it looks like they're going north. So what you do is you then go from that point, you go all the way back past Florence, all the way south. And so that's not where authorities would expect to see them. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, it doesn't make sense. And that's why it would be quite a good strategy. In other words, you go, turn around, you go the same way south, past Florence, sort of towards Louisiana and whatever, and who's going to expect you to be there? Another possibility is you use the Brian Laundrie school of disappearing. Remember, Brian Laundrie was a fugitive and they couldn't find him for like a month, right? What do you think is the Brian Laundrie school of disappearing? Let's have a look at some of your comments. Greg, good to see you. Because of the media attention and their size difference, they were very conspicuous. Absolutely. That's something that I don't know if she thought about enough, that it was going to be so obvious. She may have thought it is a problem and we'll wear disguises, and then that's good enough for me, which just shows you not, maybe she wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. Like to be aware of that and then go, well, we'll just put on a wig. That's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. Ricky says, where's the 50,000 at? Is it in a bank? I don't know. It may have been spent. It may have been spent on possibly weapons and on vehicles. I'm not quite sure. But, yeah. As I said, in New York, they could disappear in the crowd. No, not with it being such a high-profile case. I get what you're saying. Unless you could be like the master of disguise, hide in plain sight, but then you'd have to have really good disguises on the level of Jason Bourne and those, or not Jason Bourne, Mission Impossible, where you can kind of put masks on the face and change the nose and, you know, wear like a fat suit, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. Choi says they should have purchased a car that was popular. So, yeah. Okay, so do you know what I mean by the Brian Laundrie school of disappearing? Stephanie says, I lived in a small town with a level 5 maximum security prison. They always said we were in the safest place because inmates would flee far away. Maybe they figured everyone would look further away. What's also quite interesting is the motel they stayed in, I think, was directly opposite the sheriff's office in Evansville. Quite interesting. Yeah, she didn't have over 100,000. She sold the house for 95. But yeah, they'd blown through a lot of money. It seems like they had, but maybe some of it was stashed somewhere. I would imagine if his game was to use her in the full extent of the word, meaning to use and also dispose of her, then he would want to encourage her to stash some of the money somewhere. In other words, disconnect her from a lot of the cash, put the cash in a bag, bury it somewhere, whatever, and then if he killed her later, then it would be a way to get the cash and be somewhere else, and if that makes sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if that definitely is possible. But yeah, I mean, it depends on how much these vehicles cost. You could do some simple math. What did the blue Ford cost? Was the Cadillac ultimately bought? What did the Ford Edge cost? But we may be talking about 3 different vehicles here, 3 vehicles that were bought. So the Brian Laundrie school of disappearing, which I think would have been the most effective way of staying on the run, is basically go into the bush with no phone, with no car, and be very uncomfortable. So it's basically camping for quite a long time, and you're very unlikely to be found. You find some stretch of wilderness, and you go into the bush. You don't have a phone, you don't have a car, you don't have television, you off the grid, and you in that situation. And this is where I think the psychology comes out. They were trying to escape a difficult life, right? They were trying to escape a life behind bars or in front of bars. So you want to escape to what? To hotel rooms, to TV, to ice cream, to being on the road, to all the freedom and that. So they're not really thinking about escape in a practical, realistic sense. They don't want to do the work. They want to enjoy, it's like a road trip. Let's stay in hotels. We've got money. Let's stay in hotels. None of that really makes sense. But I'm not saying the criminal mind is smart, just that it is criminal. So by far the majority of you in this poll, 383 have voted. If you haven't voted, make sure you do. But almost 60% of you say he was using her. I really believe that. I believe he was using her because of the tone and the lack of remorse. I'm not saying he didn't have certain positive feelings towards her, and maybe he was grateful and maybe he liked her. But in terms of a long-term commitment and love, I really don't think he was anywhere near as caught up in what was going on with her as she was caught up in what was going on with him. If you look at who gave up the most in this relationship, like literally who risked the most and gave up the most, is by far from her side. She lost her life, she lost her job, she lost her income, she lost her house. She basically lost everything. And what did he lose? He really didn't lose anything. He gained a little bit of a break from jail and he's back where he was. If you look at what she gave up compared to what he gave up, she gave up virtually everything. He had nothing really to offer except, in a way, his wonderful personality. Bridget says her reputation and legacy. Moon Rain says those types will do whatever suits them with your resources. Yeah. Pauline says it's really odd she called 911. Didn't she know better than that? It may be that she panicked and that she realized that it was over and had kind of a change of heart. It was like, oh crap, this didn't work. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And you could actually see how kind of aggressively they were being pursued, right? And I think the high-profile nature of the case put pressure on the marshals, but also added a level of intensity to the pursuit. They didn't just kind of capture them, they rammed their vehicles into them. I mean, early on, I saw footage of some of these big trucks, unmarked cars used by the US Marshals that had some serious dents in them. There was some serious kind of collisions going on between these US Marshal vehicles and the Cadillac, right? That's got to be. It's scary enough being in a car accident where you go off the road. It's a lot scarier when there's a bunch of big vehicles pushing you off the road. You've got to get the sense of, wow, this SHIT is real. This has become real. And you might go, okay, I want to time out, right? Some people say that she was looking for a negotiator. I think the answer is quite obvious. The theme of the story is escape. And so she wants to escape her humdrum life. And I think in this situation where they're being pursued by the authorities, this is what they recognized. She also wants to escape that. She wants to escape the worst case scenario, I guess, is the answer, and she ultimately doesn't. So I think she calls 911 in order for there to be, let's say, more gentle being taken into custody, a more gentle confrontation, right? I think she's trying to escape that. The suicide is also escape. Now that I can't, now that it's a fait accompli kind of thing, I I've lost my retirement. I've lost everything. I'm going to lose my lover as well. I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to face this life. I want to escape that as well. And that's why she takes her life. I saw a comment that really bothered me. I'm just going to bring it up here. One of the things she said was, where is it? Somebody commented somewhere, I'm not sure if it was YouTube or somewhere, but someone commented she didn't mind dying, right? Somebody said Vicky didn't mind dying. Do you think that's true? Margaret Zabinski, thanks for a great stream. Thanks, Margaret. Do you think that is true, that Vicky didn't mind dying? Yeah, she said, don't kill us. It was awful. So maybe I misunderstood the person who said she didn't mind dying, but let me put it in two ways. The first one is, I think she absolutely did mind dying when it came down to it. I think she absolutely did want to live and wanted to, she did mind dying. At the time that this was happening, she was in a way having the time of her life. She was with a man that she loved. She was on this exciting adventure. All of this wasn't because she wanted to die. It was because she wanted to live, right? She absolutely, all of this money that she'd gotten hold of by selling her home and all the effort to help this guy break out wasn't because she didn't mind dying. It was because she wanted to live. He did too. He also wanted to not go to court and then be sentenced and then be stuck in jail. Both of them wanted to live. So it's not that she didn't mind dying. She absolutely did mind dying, right? In a hypothetical sense, where you say they are back in time and he's in jail and she's the award-winning officer, she probably felt like she was dying. She probably felt like, I don't like my life. It's dull. It's repetitive. It's not a life. This is not living. And so you then start having this fantasy of breaking out of that life and breaking the law, but trying to just run off and disappear and live happily ever after. And then you do anticipate the things going wrong, and you say, okay, we'll wear wigs and we'll get an alias when we buy that vehicle. And I don't know if you guys know, they actually got a homeless dude to check them in to the motel. They got a homeless dude to use his ID, I think, to check them in for the 2 weeks at the hotel. So they were thinking in a certain way, right? But they probably also thought, if push comes to shove, things could go pear-shaped. I'm prepared to take that risk. I'm prepared to take what I think is a small risk, and it wasn't a small risk, but I'm prepared to take a small risk in order to live. I'm prepared to risk my life in order to live. But that's not, I didn't mind dying. I do mind dying. That's why I'm trying to mitigate these risks. So the other thing that I think they didn't anticipate, and it's easy to overlook, is who actually solved this case, right? What brought this to such a quick end result, relatively quick? And the answer is the combination of it being very, very high profile. I really don't think they thought that they would be on national news. I think there are a couple of convicts that escaped that it's just not national news. This kind of went international. It was even on Sky and BBC and top story on CNN, and it was all over. So I don't think they expected that. and not just for one day, many days. And so the fact that it was so high profile meant certain people who watch TV or whatever are now almost like law enforcement, almost like in the Matrix where anyone can be an agent. And so one of the most unlikely people provides a breakthrough clue, and it's this dude from the car wash. And I must say, when I saw him, Brian Enton interviewed him. Did any of you guys see that dude? He's like got a really long beard, really long hair. You can almost not see his eyes. Did you guys see that guy? Ali Cat says, I wonder if she had a tendency to make spontaneous decisions in her life. I would think it's the opposite, that she was stuck in this mindless routine, and this was a complete contradiction to that, which he wanted. Zircon says, yes. Kami Burchett says, I saw him. Jody says, yes. Claire Sanders says, yes, saw the car wash dude. Ya's daughter says, yes, he deserves the reward. Yeah, I wonder if he's going to get that reward. So, yeah, so this car wash dude seems like the unlikeliest guy to bring this case to a head. And he actually said that he contacted the authorities and they kind of blew him off. He contacted them and then they were like, the vehicle's not stolen, later, dude. And then they came back to him. And then it did turn out to be a legitimate lead. But in a weird way, you'd be like, wow, this guy called it in. This guy called the cops. Sunflowers, thanks very much. Because think of it from the other side of the story. Think of it from Casey White's perspective. And tell me if I'm wrong in this, let's call it intuition, right? Was Casey White thinking that I'm going to drive this vehicle that we've got, this dark blue Ford, and I'm going to leave it, I'm going to park it inside this car wash, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to walk away, right? And what is going to happen after that? You've got to imagine that him, maybe, and Vicky are thinking like anticipating human behavior, right? And so do you think that this is a sound theory? Basically that they between the two of themselves, but especially him, because he's a carjacker, right? He's a car thief. Do you think that he's thinking, I'm going to drive this car to the car wash, abandon it. I'm not going to abandon it in a field. I'm going to abandon it where someone is going to have access to it, and that someone can theoretically just take it, right? In other words, if this car wash dude is an opportunist, if he's a chancer, if he's a crook himself, then this dude could just take the car. And he would either take it unknowingly, like, well, somebody just left their car and thanks a lot, or he could take it kind of going, I actually think that this belongs to these fugitives, but you know what? I'm not going to report it. I'm just going to keep it. Who's going to know? Kind of thing. And were they counting on that? Did they actually see the car wash dude and kind of go, he's never going to call it in, this guy? And they may have looked at him and based on his appearance thought, because he's got this really long beard, long hair, thought he's not a very conscientious guy. He's not the kind of guy to call the cops. Maybe he's a crook himself. He's not going to want to call the cops. Or maybe he's struggling in his work, with a car wash. He's not doing very well. And so he's going to be greedy and he's going to either take the truck for himself or sell the truck to somebody else. And that's going to be the broken link that's going to allow them to get away with whatever it is. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what they may have thought about him? SM Kovalinsky says they misjudged him. That's really well put. I think they did. I was quite surprised. I was like, wow, you are the dude who is the breakthrough here, and you really did do a good job. Because he had it's not the first thing you do to call the police. if you see a vehicle somewhere, it's not necessarily the first thing you do is call the police. And he called the police very early on as well. It's not like he twiddled his thumbs and thought about it and slept on it. He called them like very quickly. I think the very next day. I think the car was there overnight for one night. That's not a very long time, right? Let's read some of your comments. Not there yet says, okay, thanks, I'm behind on this case. Maybe police were not too bothered. So the other thing is, when he called the cops, I don't know whether it was a video call. I think the cops did follow up in person. If I remember what was said properly, I think the cops did turn up. But they may also have judged him. They may have looked at him, the cops now, they may have looked at him and thought, this guy's not credible. This guy's taking a chance. This is not it. You know what I mean? And so appearances can sometimes be misleading, And that the fact that this guy called the cops and the cops didn't do anything meant that the cops gave away a critical period of time where the couple could have gotten much further away, and they just lucked out that the couple had decided then not to go anywhere. They said they were really surprised that they were still in Evansville, even though they'd first sort of thrown away this lead and then found, okay, it is a legitimate lead, and then they followed it up, and sure enough, they were still in town. If they'd followed up on that lead and the couple had left, it would be the whole thing all over again, dumping a vehicle somewhere else and all that, and they would have had potentially a few days head start all over again, and they could have just gone to a totally different place. So this dude broke the case, basically. So I do hope he does get the reward. Sunflower says, looked like the truck was blocking the car wash. Not a very good idea. Well, it was a car wash with like 3 or 4 bays. Yeah. Katie says, was there an intimate relationship going on between these two prior to the breakout? Yes and no. They were in a serious relationship, I guess. I think it was referred to in the media as a special relationship. We know that they were having phone conversations. I almost said something else. But yeah, phone conversations, whether it was more than that, who knows? Inmates could probably tell you. Let me ask, we've got someone here who has worked in a prison. Let me ask Camille, do you know of any situation where prison guards were having sex with prisoners when you were working? Were you aware of that sort of taking place? Obviously, it may happen between prisoners, but I can't really imagine that it never happens, but a jail situation may be a little bit different, just because there's this flux and flow of prisoners all the time, and jails are, I think, smaller. I could be wrong, but I would assume jails are smaller in America than prisons. Amy says, Alabama doesn't have conjugal visits, LOL. Vicky was married to a man and he died. I think she was giving up on life. I think that was what the specter of death is sort of hanging over her. It's like, I'm going to retire, I'm going to die. My life hasn't amounted to much. I want to live. That's really what she's feeling. Pug Lady says, I read somewhere that Vicky was upset that they were staying in a motel for so long. Apparently he wanted to just stay in the motel. So bear in mind, it's a different set of circumstances for both of them. She's been sleeping in a bed and eating normal meals and driving to work and, having a fairly normal life. In the evenings, leaving the jail and getting whatever she wanted, getting fast food or whatever. He's been stuck in jail, and for 2 years he hasn't eaten non-jail food. I don't know whether he's watched TV. He's got to sleep in the beds that are in jail, and the motel probably felt like paradise. Like, I can do what I want. I don't have to wake up at a certain time. I don't have to go to sleep at a certain time. With a woman, I can eat chocolates and ice cream and whatnot. I can wear certain clothes, and I can have a bath, and I can, do whatever. And that probably felt like heaven. And so that's why I wanted to enjoy that. But, being a fugitive is a hard life. And if you want to stay on the run, you've got to work at it. And he obviously didn't. He didn't have the work ethic, if that makes sense. Troy says, when Nick said phone, ... Giant Mad Bum says, shower without other dudes. Yeah, for sure. Just think about the thing where you are surrounded by other men, other sweaty guys, and he's a big dude himself, but you're surrounded by the chatter and the noise and all that stuff. And now you in a motel and it's quiet and you're in your own space and you have your own bed and you can do whatever you want. And you can imagine that can be something that feels amazing. I was in the Air Force myself, which is very regimented. It feels a bit like prison. We stayed in like a camp, like a barracks, and it's probably quite funny to say this. So yeah, I actually broke out. I would jump over a wall, very high wall, but I would jump over this wall that was some distance behind the barracks, and then I would also have a car staged. I'd park my car there, and then I'd go and spend the weekend with my aunt and uncle in Johannesburg. And because it was like nothing's happening over the weekend, and I don't have weekend leave, but I'm not going to sit here for the whole weekend. And I probably did it 4 or 5 times, and there you go. So, I mean, I escaped out of jail, but it was, you had to be quite strong because quite a high wall. But if you ran up to the wall and jumped, you could just get your fingers onto the top. And if you're quite strong, you could pull yourself up. So, but it's kind of the same thing. Do I want to be in this place? If I don't absolutely have to be? And answer was no. And I think on maybe the 3rd time that I went to my uncle, I think they said, because I mean, they would give me dinner and I would sleep there, and it's exactly the same thing they were getting in the motel. You can watch TV and whatever, but you're not in these you're not in this sort of crappy environment. This sort of courtyards, sandy, dusty courtyards, and just impersonal space, right? Where, anyway, and I think the 2nd or 3rd time I went to my uncle, I think they said, are you AWOL? Which means absent without leave. It's like a military term. You've left your post without permission. And I can't remember if I told them the truth, because I think potentially if I told them the truth, they may have said, we're not, it's like we're not aiding and abetting this. I can't really remember, but I know they asked me. So that was quite interesting. Syrian Moon says, I don't understand why they did not go to a cabin and hide. I must say that's a good point. I don't know why you would hide out in a motel in a town. Why don't you go to to a place that's on its own. Why not? He was a dude that broke into places. Why not find a place, a hut somewhere, but it comes back down to he was quite lazy, I think, and he wasn't prepared to do the work. And let's face it, criminals are criminals not because they are prepared to do the hard work. It's because they're not. Criminals are criminals because they try and cheat the system, and they're not prepared to pay the price that people who aren't criminals are prepared to pay. Stephanie says, sorry if I missed your seeing it. That's a super chat from someone. AS, riveting and insightful commentary. Thanks a lot. AS from Canada. Thanks very much. Thanks, Stephanie, for letting me know. So if some of you guys are new to this channel and you're enjoying the community here, there are definitely everyone in the true crime community is really, especially the mods, are very lovely people and clever. And Stephanie, for example, went to CrimeCon, and we're about to deal with her notes in a special StreamYard thing. But there's just a really nice bunch of people. If you want to join the discussion on Patreon, make sure you join. You can be part of Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And if you find it not really doing it for you, then you can, after a month, you can, you don't have to renew or whatever. So come for a month, and if you like it, you can stay. Nisi, thank you very much for that. Sharon says, hi, Misa Mom. Katie says, exactly, good point about criminals. We're not talking about a mastermind here. Fern says, it didn't sound like she wanted to die on the 911. Yeah, absolutely. I do think there was a sense of risk, and I'm aware that this could be life-threatening, which is why we're going to buy these weapons. But they're not doing it because they're prepared to die. They're doing it because they are pursuing life. That's what they really want. And they, I think, underestimated how easy it would be. But I think you can definitely see how, if it didn't go so high profile, they may have done a lot better for a lot longer. Even so, because he's such a big dude, it was never going to work. Definitely was never going to work. And so when you ask the question, what was she thinking? The answer is she wasn't really thinking. She was caught up. It's like love is blind. And when you're in love, you don't think. So I'm not saying there was absolutely no thinking, but if she wasn't in love, there would have been a lot more thinking involved and a lot more planning and a lot more, it would have worked out a bit better. But the reason they did this, certainly her reason for making sure it happened, was love. Terry Dean, Vicky White was prepared to shrink her world to just one person. I'm not so sure Casey White was. I almost thought you were kind of saying, like Chris Watts. When I saw that CW, I thought you were going to refer to Chris Watts. That's exactly what Chris Watts did. Chris Watts shrank his world down to one person. Getting rid of my family, getting rid of my house. Didn't get rid of his job, but he was prepared to shrink his world just to one person. And that is what can happen when you are desperately in love, when it's this incredible thing. And you've got to think, what creates that feeling of being desperately in love? Well, the other side of it, which is the barrenness of being alone, the barrenness of a loveless marriage, or a marriage that's whatever, not doing it for you, the barrenness of retirement, where what is there to look forward to? And so this was something that captured her imagination, and that's what happened. Sharon Lynn, thanks for that. She says Nick van der Leek has written over 100 books available on Amazon, Kindle, and 20 audiobooks on Patreon. Bob Van Lara says giant in lust with his bust. Pauline Buckles, imagining a future that was bleak. Yeah, she's trying. This is all about escape. And I think we live in a society that is very much caught up in that. I'm someone who, I like to think of myself as someone who deals with the real world, who is absorbed by reality or absorbed with reality, who's not afraid of reality, even though reality is often very scary. I used to watch the war in Ukraine every single day, and now I just don't, because it's overwhelming. You cannot stand the all of reality. It's just too much. It's just too much. And I think the human mind, the human psychology, basically finds a way to make life manageable. And if you insist on dealing with all the slings and arrows, I think you can get quite depressed. So you've got to find a level of reality that's manageable, and be careful in setting that level, because you may set it at a level that's too low, and you are thus escaping too much, and you thus living in a bit of a fantasy world. And you may be setting it too high, that you are, and I might be one of those people. I mean, I'm a very analytical person. I deal with true crime all the time, death, crime, accountability, etc. And sometimes you do need to balance the other side. I mean, life's not just about accountability. Life's also about living. Life's not about what you do in your retirement. It's what you do in the hours leading up to that as well, kind of thing, So I think this case does bring up some quite important questions about how we escape and how realistic we are about that, even though escapism is all about not being realistic. That's why, as I say, people can climb Mount Everest. You're not climbing Mount Everest because you've appreciated the risks. It's because part of it is about not doing that. Part of the fun is not thinking too much about those risks and just going out and having the adventure. It's about stepping into the unknown, not knowing. It's not about stepping into the unknown knowing. I'm just saying, like me going on my little adventure and breaking my rib, there is a risk to trying to pursue life, and you must just accept that. But don't accept it blindly, like someone who's in love with a criminal. Go into it with a little bit of, well, you know what I'm talking about. That's what I like about true crime, is where you look at it, examine it, understand it, but then bring it back to yourself and bring it back to others, and use it as kind of a cautionary tale. I see we're at over an hour 38. I thought I was actually going to wrap at 90 minutes, but I suppose I can go on a little bit longer. 270 of you in chat, which is feels like quite a lot compared to the Van Gogh letters. I'm just going to take you guys through a script that I wrote down here. And then I'll take some questions, and then we'll wrap. Okay. So I'm just reading from a script that I did in preparation for this live. We all thought Vicky helping Casey escape from prison was a kidnapping. In the beginning, we thought that it could be a kidnapping. My very first video was, did Vicky elope with Casey? And it turned out that she did. I must say, I first thought that she eloped. Then I thought, whoa, that doesn't make sense. This guy's a criminal. Blah, 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 blah. So I first thought she eloped, but then I wasn't so sure. But then it turned out that she had. But I wonder had the fugitives been on the run for long enough, so if they hadn't been caught, how would the dynamic of their relationship have changed? So if for whatever reasons the marshals didn't take this car wash dude's, Timmy, can I put you down? Yeah. If for whatever reason the marshals just didn't respond to the tip and they were still on the run now, and days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, how could this dynamic actually have played out? Like what would have happened? And I think it may not have changed given that they'd had a 2-year affair. So I don't think it would have just petered out. The fact that they'd gotten to know each other for 2 years, I think, showed that there was some kind of substance holding them together. I also think that as soon as they are outside the jail scenario, that dynamic is going to change because she's no longer in a position of power. He's not in a position of being the helpless prisoner. And so without knowing him very well, it's difficult to know exactly how that would sort of play out. Also, if her money ran out, would he still want to be with her? Right? If her money ran out, would the love not also run out? I think 2 years is a long time to develop deep feelings for someone, and definitely from her side, I think that did happen. So let's just see that comment from Vicky. Oh, Vicky, Terry. Terry's been a member for 4 months. Wow. Nick, someone asked, do you think Vicky would have killed to continue their journey? Well, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. It's a really good question. If you look at what she said on the 911 call, she said, let's get out and run. So I would say no. On the other hand, do you buy weapons like weapons that I think she bought? Do you buy them if you're not going to use them? So that's definitely an interesting question. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question. I think I would have to say it looks like it. The fact that she bought those weapons, that's not for nothing. She didn't just buy like one handgun. Yeah. I think she bought an AR-15, which is a semi-automatic. That's pretty hardcore, right? That's pretty hardcore. Patricia says, I loved the Van Gogh live yesterday as it was taking place in my country. Oh, that's good to hear. I think there's something that I missed here. Let me just see if I can bring it up. So, yeah, just some more background. The authorities said that they had engaged in a phone relationship secretly for 2 years, at least 2 years, and Vicky gave Casey perks like extra food in prison. So that was something that obviously meant a little bit to him, getting these little things, and the food, giving him extra food eventually becomes giving him money and guns and an opportunity to escape. So that's what it starts with. She gives him some food and then later on is buying him meals and board and lodging. According to the briefing on Tuesday morning, they said that after 6 days since the car wash sighting, it was hard to believe that they were still in Evansville. And the dude giving the briefing said, he said, quote, I wouldn't think that somebody on the run would stay in a community like Evansville for 6 days, end quote. Remember my advice or my speculation was that they would go west where there was like much thinner human inhabitation, maybe towns that were even smaller. And so do you think ramming and a grass ditch scenario would have happened in the far more rural Midwest. In other words, do you think you could even have a scenario like that with the car being rammed in a sort of rural Midwest situation? For me, what I would imagine in that is that there would be one vehicle pursuing them, because it would be spread all over the place. You wouldn't have like 4, 5, 6 U.S. Marshals descending on them, maybe, but I just don't see the same thing. Also, as I said earlier, why are you staying in a town when you can stay in the truck? Anyway, what else did he say? The detectives that interviewed Casey White said that they planned to get into a shootout. I think you guys know about that. They planned to have a shootout with law enforcement if that happened, but that was stymied. That was actually prevented by the ramming of the vehicle and hitting a grass ditch. So you could, I don't really know whether the cops knew about their weapons. I suppose you could argue that they may have looked inside the Cadillac. Did they know that they'd bought these weapons? Maybe they did. But if they did, then it would make sense to ram the vehicle and cause this concussive type scenario, which they'd be stunned. And in that situation, very dangerous. But in that situation, where they are stunned, you can then get the upper hand, right? And that is exactly what happened. But I think there's another way of doing this, is that they could have, they could actually have, I suppose they didn't know that the couple were going to stay at the hotel or motel for a long time. They could theoretically have had their surveillance in a totally different way, where they could have, when Vicky came out the motel, they could have sent somebody in and said, how long are they booked to stay here, right? In other words, if you really want to save Vicky's life, if you're like, we've got to take extra care here to save her. And obviously I'm playing Monday morning quarterback. I mean, this is really unfair because they didn't know this. We know it now. But what they could theoretically have done, if it was like, we really want to save her life at all costs, how they could have achieved that is, when they were doing surveillance of the motel, the moment Vicky came out, you could have had one car following them, right? Not lots, just one car from a discrete distance. And then, but you could have immediately sent in an officer and said, okay, I'm a U.S. Marshal. How long are these people staying here? And if they said, oh, they booked to be another 6 days, well, then you could have called off the surveillance. The guy was following, right? You could have called him off, let the Cadillac go wherever it was going, knowing that it's going to come back. And theoretically, the money could have still been in the motel room. I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Maybe some of the guns were in the motel room. I don't know. But maybe they had a reason to come back. So let's say the officer came in, went to reception. Who are these people? How long they're staying? Obviously, they have aliases. Can I have a look at the room? Call off the surveillance. Wait for them to come back. And then when one of them goes off to buy something at a convenience store, which would definitely happen, that's when you seize one of them. Now you've got the one, and then you could do something like, I don't know if they had burner phones or something. I'm having trouble with carrying the Coca-Cola and crisps or whatever. Can you come help me? When the other one comes out, that's when you seize the other one. QED. As I say, easier said than done, but that would have been a way to have a less confrontational and dangerous encounter. But you are dealing with a dude who, it's a serious crimes, and she got caught up in his serious criminality and paid with her life, right? yeah, so there's that. Apparently, Casey said that he was just trying to find a place to hide out and lay low, and they thought they'd driven long enough, and they wanted to stop for a while, get their bearings, and figure out the next place to travel. I think all of that's true, but like I said earlier, I think the 14-day stay is quite a lot. It's you could stay for 4 days, not 14. Apparently, this place had unflattering online reviews, according to the Associated Press, bed bugs and moldy walls, and cost $50 a night. I must say, from the outside, it didn't look that seedy, but maybe it was. But even so, maybe it was still paradise compared to prison. Yeah. Let me look at some more of your questions and comments. They didn't, I don't know if they left after 6 days. They left that day, but I don't know if it was, I don't know if they were leaving, they were all packed up. They left that day, maybe just to do a local errand, unless you've got more information than I do, Angela. Fern says the amount of money the cops found keeps getting lower and lower every news report. Apparently cops had their fingers in it. I don't know if that's fair or true. Could be. But I think Stephanie says, Renee says her choices plans were really bad, shoddy, poor judgment at best. Yeah, I mean, I think she's a fairly simple person. She's not, I don't think she's the sharpest tool in the shed. But the main thing is the discrepancy between winning these awards for being this great worker, being very conscientious and loved by her colleagues, and then this other behavior. That's the other theme. If the one theme is escapism, the other theme is, do you really know someone? And also, equally in terms of yourself, aren't you capable of behaving irrationally under certain circumstances? Aren't you sometimes capable of bad decisions? When I fell off my mountain bike and I broke my rib, I drove home after that. So I'm driving home with a broken rib. Now you can imagine if there's another impact, you know. Also, I had very little sleep. That's partly why I think I fell, was because I'd not slept very well. So now you compound the already bad situation that you've got a broken rib by getting into a car and driving, right? And the way that you mitigate a bad decision, right? This is what I was kind of thinking, because it was my fault that I fell. You know, it's not like that was a bad decision, but it was obviously a bad situation. But the way that you mitigate a bad decision is you need to increase your level of alertness. You need to increase your level of mitigation. So when I was driving, I was like, you need to be wide awake. You need to drive defensively, and you need to not drive too fast. And you need to drink quite a few cups of coffee, and you need to be very careful. And so that's how you take a thing that maybe you know is not such a great decision, and you make something out of it. The same with Vicky and Casey. I think they knew what's going on isn't without risk, but then you need to increase your level of vigilance and being careful. And staying 2 weeks in a motel isn't very careful. Staying in the same place is lazy, right? Bridget Bowman says sometimes when you make a bad decision, it becomes a domino effect of further bad decisions. Often is true, especially in the relationship sense, right? Status quo, I found the local sheriff, law enforcement entities are grossly underrated. That said, the input of citizenry was pivotal in this righteous ending. Well said. Yeah, sitting here in South Africa, looking at the policing. It's the type of vehicles that are used, the manpower, the sheer amount of manpower is definitely impressive. It's definitely, you look at that and you're like, wow, these guys aren't messing around. This is very organized, and the law enforcement is definitely effective, definitely. Renee says, I didn't hear that the homeless man tented in the room for the duration. I almost doubt. Okay. Someone's got a bit of a difference of opinion. Patricia, being with someone 24/7 in such stressful circumstances was never going to be a walk in the park. I think sex would have made it a lot of fun and a lot of very enjoyable for both of them. And bear in mind, theoretically, neither of them had had sex in 2 years, and he's 36 and she's, he's 38 and she's 56. So just in terms of time going without, you can kind of imagine it probably felt like a bit of a sleazy honeymoon, but nevertheless fun for the participants. I thought he looked quite good looking compared to some of the mugshots I'd seen, where he's actually taken into custody and he's wearing this white shirt and like another shirt above that with a collar. I thought he actually looked quite, from her perspective, quite a good looking guy. He sort of looked quite fresh faced. I had a different impression. He looked older to me and uglier in some of the photos, whereas in that footage where they take him out of the car and put him in handcuffs or whatever it was, I thought he looked better than was my first impression. I don't know what you guys thought. Patricia says she must have dressed him. Yeah, well, he's dressed in yellow now, I think. Renee says my face is red. Pauline says he called her his wife. Maybe he did have some affection for her. I'm sure he had affection for her. I think even in the narrow confines of him being in jail and her giving him sort of more food than anyone else, or more, the perks like extra dessert or whatever, that would have led to affection. He would have felt grateful. He would have felt, remember, he's a big guy. He would be hungry. It's a 6'9" body, does require more food to satiate. But he would have felt grateful and pleased, and she would have felt something that he's smiling at her, and there would be twinkles in the eyes, kind of thing. So also him helping her escape, he would have felt real gratitude. Don't underestimate that. He's under the cosh because he's about to stand trial for murder. She's allowing him to escape that. It's almost like, you saved my life. And so you can imagine there being this sexual sparks flying because of the real relief, real sense of, wow, I got my life back, kind of thing. And that's going to fill you with the joy juices, the feelings of adrenaline and serotonin and whatever, and you're just going to be in a good mood. So I wouldn't underestimate that aspect. And she's going to feel like a hero as well. She's going to feel like his hero, and that she's important to someone, and that she means something to someone beyond the way that she has been as in the jail situation. I often feel that what is missing in true crime is exactly what we're sort of doing, where you imagine what they are thinking, but where you spend some time doing that. When you imagine what she's thinking and feeling, but you spend some time doing that, it's not just shallow labeling, and you actually take some time and you try and put yourself in their shoes, and not only their shoes, some of the shoes of the other people as well. the car wash owner, and so I often feel in true crime what's missing, it's like a failure of the imagination. We don't imagine enough what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And I think that may also apply just in our general lives as well. What is it like to be a family member of ours that disapproves of us? What is it like to be whatever? And you might think it's just a waste of time, but you get a much richer sense of what is really going on, in other words, of reality, when you do that. And it does take some time and effort to sit down and contemplate, but in a deeply intuitive way. You may not be completely right about it, but you certainly are coming closer to understanding than when you have that just superficial black-white thinking, where is it this, is it that? When you literally take what you know and then you think about the realities in a personal way, certainly in a way you know that. Terry Dean says, will they do toxicology? That's a good question. Maybe. That's also quite interesting. Maybe the toxicology aspect may also speak to the feeling of being intoxicated as well. Some people, when they're in love, want to combine that with substances. A lot of people, when they go out on a date or go for a meal, they'll drink. They'll have a glass of wine. But you can also feel like I want to enjoy this thing with other substances, and who knows whether that was the case. Certainly in the Johnny Depp thing, that seems to be the case, that's part of the fabric of their relationship. Whether it was the fabric of Vicky's and, you can also imagine Casey kind of going, well, I haven't smoked a cigarette in 2 years, or I haven't had a whatever in 2 years, and I haven't had a whiskey in 2 years or whatever. And so definitely wants to do that. You just want to kind of unplug. You want, glad to see some of you smiling and laughing. Thought Criminal says, got to catch up on the rewind when it's over. I hope you do. Nisi says, the reality of him being an extremely violent killer, no matter the love between them, I don't think she would have ever survived that monster. He may have just left her. He may have left her and taken her money. We don't know, but it does seem, as I said, the best predictor of the future is the past. If he's killed 2 people and one of them was a 58-year-old woman, at what point does he lose his temper? Does the penny drop? Is she a witness? Is she someone who, like if he wants to go left and she wants to go right, and or she's decided she's had enough, they can't just break up. Or he may think they can't just break up. She's going to be a witness, and she's thus a threat to him, can say where he is, or something like that. Something like that could definitely happen. Ricky says, how do you stop smoking? Well, you change your identity. You don't say, I'm a smoker trying to stop smoking. You start off by saying, I'm not a smoker. That's not who I am. Oh, Stephanie says, good to see me smiling and laughing too. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I actually contacted my friend who died, his wife, yesterday, just to say I'm going for a mountain bike ride, and, something inside me was broken, and maybe it's not fixed, but it's certainly healed to some extent. And that time does heal broken wounds and so on. So she seemed to quite appreciate that. Amy says he claims to have killed one. He was serving 75 years for attempted murder where he tried to kill an ex-girlfriend. it's not quite how I understand it. How I understand it, he went on a crime spree in 2015. Maybe you are right. So he went on a crime spree that didn't include murder. It was home invasion, carjacking, killing a dog, as you say, attempting to kill an ex-girlfriend, and I think also his sister. So I just don't quite. Okay, so now it makes sense. I thought the 75. It says was serving 75 years for a 2015 crime spree. That included but was not limited to all of those things. Then it says, in September 2020, he was charged with capital murder of the brutal stabbing of a 58-year-old woman. So I don't know if that was part of the original crime spree. But I must say, when I read that, I thought, well, you couldn't have been serving 75 years unless you committed a murder in that. Unless you can get 75 years for attempted murder. So it looks like he killed only one woman, right? Is that correct? Okay, so I stand corrected. Thanks for that. Amy, thanks for that. We want to be accurate. Ricky says, I smoked for 57 years. Well, that's a while. Choice, I hope you keep up your good behavior. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Wild Dog says, his confession to the stabbing doesn't match up to actually what happened. However, they are still trying to convict him. Yeah. It's just the way it's worded. They say 75 years for a crime spree. Well, wouldn't that include murder then? But that's just how I read it. Jenny Friedman, I really don't understand why or how she could feel comfortable with him. Well, Jenny, I think you've got to bring the sex part into it, that she's 56 years old and he's a lot younger than her, and for whatever reason she's flattered by that. I think the fact that he's this young man and she's facing a lonely retirement, and that it's a young man that is showing an interest in him. And think about every time she gives him an extra dollop of ice cream, he smiles at her and winks at her, whatever. Every time that happens, the reality that he's a murderer becomes a little bit less horrible. It's like, oh, he's actually a good guy. He's actually a nice guy. I actually like him. What he's done is unacceptable, but I nevertheless like him, and I think he likes me. And wow, that's how I think it kind of happened. Also, they have a shared sense of wanting to get out of the jail environment. Both of them don't want to be there. She can help him, and she likes helping people, I guess. Maybe that's why she became a corrections officer. I don't know why that's funny. Maybe he is misunderstood. I prefer to think about who she was as a person. Anyway, Jenny Friedman, I am near her age and I'm happy alone. I don't understand people who are that desperate. Well, have you been unhappy in your work for 20 years or 25 years? Or has your work been an environment that's quite dull and depressing? In other words, if you're happy alone, maybe you've got a fabric around you you're in nature, maybe you've got family or something, maybe you've got children. Remember, she doesn't have children either. I think maybe also, you must remember, we are all on like this march towards death. No matter what we do, we are all moving on this conveyor belt that only moves in one direction, time. and she's 56 years old. She doesn't have children, and she wants that feeling of life that defies death. And children can kind of give you that. A dog does as well. It gives you that sense of being alive. When you're with them, you feel alive, but she doesn't have that. She has an older mother, right? And so she wants to escape that. So this is all about escape. She wants to escape her life. She wants to escape her fate. So does he. Yeah. He has 2 kids. I didn't know that. He has 2 kids. Okay. Also, Jenny said she didn't understand that. Jenny, do you have pets? Like, do you have a dog? Do you have cats? By the way, I didn't have a really excellent sleep last night. Bear in mind where I am, it's 5:45 in the morning. But I didn't have a really good sleep last night, and I heard these kind of sounds making bump in the night. I heard these noises. And I think what the noise was the cat going downstairs, because I've got quite big glass windows. And I think there are other cats that are coming to say hello, and they are having like almost like prisoners, you have that glass partition, almost like having a sort of a doing this against the window to each other, the cats. That's not a theory, because when I went out into the balcony, I looked out and there was a cat. So I think the cats are sort of, coming to visit my cat, and my cat sort of like, hey, something like that. And that's making a noise. Definitely is quite funny. Somebody has left. Who left? Somebody just said goodbye. Night, Angela. Okay, Angela's left. Good to have you here. I'm waiting for a response from Jenny. If you've got any pets. Yes, but I chose my path. She chose hers. I'm just saying, because pets can make being alone not very lonely. So I don't know whether you've got pets. I would also like to know whether Vicky has pets, but I would think that she doesn't. Cats are plotting an escape for sure. Status Quo says, another thought, perhaps Casey White had elements of semi-charismatics besides his sociopathy. I don't have any doubt that he must have had some charisma. I mean, I think she was charmed by him, and I think he was charmed by her, but maybe not because she was so charming, but because of her position. Just a hunch. Understandable Enigma says, escape to the secret clandestine life. Life isn't black and white. Okay, I was trying to get through this section. Let me see if I can go a bit further. 2 years is a long time to develop deep feelings for someone, even if only from one side. When a shackled Casey White, clad in a yellow overall, was brought back to Alabama, that was for his arraignment. I don't know if you heard a journalist shouting, did you love Vicky, right? And that's the question, did he love her? In the poll that you guys have responded to, thanks for that, 573 votes. If you haven't voted, make sure you do. Only 8% said you think that he did love her, but 36% said that he was using her and probably, or maybe did have feelings for her. I think that's quite an accurate, I think the voting is quite representative there of what was going on. I think he was using her more than that he loved her, but there was a little bit of love. But it was a kind of a mixture of both. I think in reverse, she was also using him. She was using him to get this exciting life that she wanted and have love in her life and have a man in her life. And enjoy sleeping with a man, right? But I think she loved him certainly more in terms of percent than he loved her, but she was also using him. In a recent interview with the Associated Press, U.S. Marshal Marty Keeley has given the most comprehensive account of this modern Bonnie and Clyde. And I'm just going to go for another 15 minutes and then that's going to be it. It was Keeley who activated the Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force and got them going after Vicky and Casey. 11 days later, it was all over. But what happened? So we're just going to go through a couple of things you may or may not know. So first of all, how did Vicky get to work on the day of the incident? Right? Bear in mind, she'd parked the copper Ford Edge where she parked it. So how did she actually get to work? So the first lead in the investigation occurred when a fellow jail worker reported, this is the very first lead. So a colleague of Vicky's reported that Vicky had called them and said that she needs to be picked up at Academy Sports Plus outdoor store in Florence, Alabama. She said she'd locked her keys in her car and needed a ride to work. So that was her story. She'd locked her keys in the car and needed a ride to work. The employee thought it was strange, but she said that they wanted to help out a friend. The employee may have thought, wow, what are you doing there, perhaps even before the shops open? What are you doing in this parking lot, at that time of the day? Then money for nothing. Weeks before the escape, Vicky sold her house for $95,000. I think the fact that she sold it for so far below market value shows how desperately in love she was, and also shows another aspect to her, which is that she was willing to be reckless. She was willing to throw life away. She was willing to throw away all of this money as well on this dude. She was willing kind of to do anything. She also sold her car. I don't know if you know that. She sold her car and she filed for retirement. So she was giving up everything, her house, her car, her job. She bought the AR-15 rifle. She also bought a shotgun. We don't really know where the shotgun was. Maybe the shotgun was in the hotel room. And that was in addition to a 9mm service weapon. And then there was also a .45 caliber pistol. So quite an arsenal there. But the question does remain, where is the shotgun? The other part that's quite interesting is she bought men's clothes at a local Kohl's store and also visited a different store that sold sex toys. Now, going to a store that sells sex toys gives you an idea that sex is quite a big deal here. It's not just speculation. It's not just maybe. It definitely was a big deal. The love was, I think, largely based on sex, and the sex was based, I think, on the idea, definitely in her mind, that she was going to be having sex with a man 18 years younger than her, this giant bad boy, and that was going to be a road trip on its own. And then there was another clue. A tow truck driver from Tennessee. So we've spoken about the first tip or the first lead came from the colleague, but the first clue after she'd broken him out was from a tow truck driver. So if you think about the people that were basically responding, it was really ordinary Joe Blows, right? Joe Publics. A tow truck driver, a a car wash owner, all of these people, and all related to cars. It's also quite interesting. If they really wanted to escape, they were going to need to stop the car thing and do something else. If they'd caught a bus or a train, that could have broken that aspect, but then the issue then also becomes aren't you going to be spotted by the public? Okay, so the marshals then searched rural Tennessee, showing photos of Vicky and Casey. So they are doing just ordinary on-the-ground police work, running around rural Tennessee with these photos, and then eventually they find a home that's got cars and trucks for sale on the lawn, right? This is quite a good spot for the marshals to drop in on. So they kind of randomly go to this home with the cars and trucks for sale. And in other words, not a proper car dealer. It's sort of a just kind of a rural, not well-known car dealership, one that you're not going to find unless you're looking for it. And the marshals show the owner of this home photos, and he instantly recognizes Casey White. He doesn't recognize Vicky, he instantly recognizes Casey. And this dude then helped the authorities piece together what had happened. The homeowner said that he'd sold a dark blue Ford F-150 pickup truck for cash. He sold that to Casey, right? So apparently Casey makes the, this is where I understand it, Casey does the transaction, not Vicky, which I think that was already a mistake. Sharon Lynn, thanks a lot for that. So that is the first mistake they make, is that he buys this truck, not her, because she may have been not so easily identifiable, whereas he's always going to stand out. So big mistake. The truck doesn't have a license plate, but White doesn't care, and then that's it. And then the other thing, which is also a mistake, is in the process of getting the one vehicle, they don't make sure that the other vehicle isn't seen. You have the overlap of the other vehicle being seen, in this case by the homeowner, and then saying, oh, yeah, we saw a woman driving the orange Ford. She pulled up, and then the two drove off tailing one another. So now you've got an absolute confirmation of that. If you really wanted to do it the right way, you needed her to buy the vehicle and leave in the vehicle and not see him at all, and not see the orange vehicle. Same with the car wash. You needed her to park the vehicle at the car wash, and him not to be in the picture at all, and the Cadillac nowhere near that. So again, laziness, lazy thinking. Again, they're not criminals because they go to the effort of thinking things through, but because of the opposite, they don't go to the effort. So anyway, during the sale of this Ford F-150 pickup truck, Vicky White pictures up in the orange Ford, and the two go off together. And well done, you've just ruined this whole thing that you're trying to do, which is I'm trying to leave that vehicle behind to go in that one. You've just messed that up because you've now linked the two together. Well done, F that one up. The homeowner also provided one more clue, which is quite critical here. And also it's quite interesting how the marshals get information, but they don't immediately know its significance. And in this case, it was the VIN number. So the homeowner provides the truck's vehicle identification number, or VIN. Stephanie's going to say goodnight. I have to be up early to get my son to the bus. It's been getting harder lately. Stephanie, thanks for being here. It is quite late. I'm not going to be on for much longer, but thank you for being here. And I'll see you on a StreamYard quite soon. Just let me know when's going to suit you. Send me a DM on Instagram. I'm not quite sure I know when exactly you want to do it, so just let me know. Anyway, thanks a lot, Steph. Moving on. So they got this VIN number, and then they abandoned the Ford Edge, and then they headed to Evansville, Indiana. And that is where Casey abandons the pickup in the bay of a car wash. And this car wash actually has got 5 bays. So it's quite a lot. 5 bays. So obviously leaving it there is not going to hold up the entire car wash. It's called Weinbach Car Wash. And it looks a little bit run down. It doesn't look like the world's finest car wash. There's not too much urban infrastructure around it. Little bit of houses, trees, biggish trees, and so on. A little yard where other vehicles are parked. And I said to you guys earlier, I said, did he hope that the car wash owner would keep it? That the car wash owner, did they sort of scope out the joint, check out the car wash owner and think that guy's not going to call this in, right? Yeah, it is 6 a.m. in South Africa. Or is he going to keep the car for himself? I think Casey and Vicky's big mistake here was assuming the rundown car wash wouldn't have CCTV. It did. One thing they could have done, one thing Casey could have done or Vicky could have done, preferably Vicky, is go and walk under the car wash and look there. Of course, it's easy to say in hindsight, but you need to be vigilant if you want to protect your whole escape, right? I take my car to a car wash. I think I'm going to look to see if I can see any CCTV there, but I doubt whether they have any. I mean, how on earth do you have a camera when they're spraying water? But it's not impossible. So at this point, they want to kind of go off the grid, and their idea of being off the grid is paying a homeless man to use his identification to rent them a hotel room. So he also becomes kind of an accessory. He becomes someone they use, and they're counting on him not calling the cops and on him not doing anything. And I don't think he did. I don't think he did call anybody. So they use this guy, but it's also kind of, on the one hand, it's reckless because he is theoretically a witness. Ideally, you want to not be doing this, not having these encounters with strangers who could blow your cover, blow your whole thing, blow your scheme. So they use his ID to rent a hotel room. They pay cash upfront for 14 days. They live under the assumed alias in the motel, and then they they acquire a third car, a Cadillac sedan. We don't know how they acquired it. How did they get it? Where did they get it? Was it stolen or was it bought? Okay, this is quoting from the Associated Press. Quote, the manager of the car wash first noticed the abandoned pickup truck on May 3rd. And this manager with long kind of hair and a very long beard, he was interviewed by Brian Enton. He realized something was wrong when this truck was still there the next morning. And so he calls the police, which Vicky and Casey thought he wouldn't do. And quite early, so just the next morning, he calls the police. An officer comes out, runs the license plates, takes a report, but also looks at this dude and goes, I don't think so. I don't think this is it. I don't think this is a lead. And so he runs the license plates, finds that the car wasn't stolen. And I think he reported this to the local police. He reported this incident to the local police, and then there was nothing they could do. They didn't take it any further. And then the breakthrough came Sunday when the officer that wrote the VIN report, I'm not sure if it was this officer, but they ran the VIN through databases, and then they actually spotted this VIN in their database. And again, I don't know if the same person with this VIN what did I write here? Did the same person with this VIN buy another vehicle on the police's list? Because we know that Vicky bought the Ford Edge, I think, using an alias. So did the same alias buy the VIN of the blue Ford F-150 as the Ford Edge? I just wonder what the answer is to that. I just don't quite know how they located, how they used the computer reference for the VIN to kind of have a match. I'm not quite sure. What did they match it to? Was it to an alias or what? I'm not quite sure. Or was it just following up and seeing what that person said, and then we've got a VIN linking what we know there to there? I'm not quite sure. Bear in mind, Vicky bought the copper Ford Edge, whereas Casey bought the blue Ford F-150. But did he buy it using Vicky's ID or the alias ID? I just don't know. In any event, it seemed to be the VIN number that got them to Evansville and got them to confirm the car wash dude's account. They verified it, that way. So, so all the marshals now go to Evansville, and they had a look at the surveillance video. And so it wasn't that they first saw the surveillance video, they first made the connection through the VIN number. Then they looked at the surveillance video, and sure enough, they actually see this Cadillac driving in the background. Not only that, they see Casey in the surveillance footage. And so this is like a bingo. And so from that moment, they go driving around, checking out motels and restaurant parking lots, not knowing how long they've been there, and also not knowing whether they're still there. And the odds are really that they aren't there anymore. So they're just doing ordinary police work, just checking. And as it turns out, they catch another break. Guess what? Your fugitives are lounging around, not on the run. They are just lying around in a motel when they could have made a lot of distance in that time. They'd actually been staying there for about a week. So they could have had like a week's head start, and instead threw away their lead. On the other hand, I suppose you could say if they stayed on the run, there would just be other sightings of them. You could also make that argument. AS says, such fascinating insights, Nick. Nick, thank you. Thank you, AS. Thanks for your super chat earlier. Heebie says, with her occupational background, you would expect Vicky to have had a much more organized getaway plan. I think yes and no. I think the other side of that is if your daily day is just this regimented thing, at this time you open the door, at this time breakfast, at that time lights out. There's not much to anticipate in a world that is totally different to that. In a setting that is completely spontaneous and random, and you know what I mean? If you're caught up in a schedule, a very regimented work environment, you don't really need to think. It's all automatic. It's all like programming. You're just kind of like a robot. And so if you go out of that, now you really need to think, because you need to look at maps, you need to look at, you need to get to know your environment very well, and sitting in a motel is not going to do that really. Yeah, institutionalized. So we've asked this question a few times, what was Vicky thinking? And I think the answer is she was doing a little bit of thinking, but nowhere near enough. They weren't thinking. That's why they got caught the way that they got caught. Jenny Friedman says, thank you everyone for your opinions and comments. Very interesting hearing others. Thank you, Nick, for your valuable information and time. Okay, so I'm almost done for the rest of you who are here. In fact, it's just 2 sentences. this quoting from Associated Press, eventually they found the car at a local motel and placed it under surveillance. So they didn't know at this point that it was the car. They were going by sight, but it did turn out to be the car. Again, you could argue here, what if they'd bought a different car, a white vehicle, for example? One must wonder, did they buy a dark-colored vehicle because they were going to travel at night? The other side to it is they could have bought a white vehicle that is very common. Often delivery vehicles are white. I don't know if in America most vehicles are black or dark. I don't know. But I would assume a white vehicle would be harder to spot, assuming that there are a lot of white vehicles. And then put it this way, if there's more than one Cadillac, then you're not going to know, is it this Cadillac or that Cadillac? But if there's more than one, let's say Toyota, a white Toyota, or a white Ford, whatever, then you might be like, well, this could be it, or that one, or that one. You're not really going to know which one to put under surveillance, right? Yeah, Patricia says she bought a gun and put it in reach of a murderer. Amy Hall says, I have a white car. Okay. Okay, so they hopped into the Cadillac and drove off with the marshals secretly tailing them. Vicky White emerged in a wig. They don't say what color it was, but they do say that there were red and blonde wigs that they found as well. I don't know whether that means she would be wearing a blonde wig. I mean, if she had blonde hair, why would she be? Maybe that was for him. I don't know. And then the pursuit ended when the officers rammed the car. And that brings up another question is, what if they'd chosen a different car, not a Cadillac? What if they'd chosen another sort of SUV or a Ford F-150? Would it have been able to, first of all, would it be so easy to ram it? I think the answer is no. Also, would it have been, would that ditch have caused truck to necessarily roll, or would it have, whether the suspension would have gotten through then? Could they, if they had stolen a different vehicle or gotten a different vehicle, could they have gotten, would it have turned out differently? And maybe there would have been a shootout then. In other words, if they weren't captured through being pushed off the road, because it was a relatively, the vehicle was a sedan. It was the first sedan that they actually got. It was like SUV sedan, right? Would it have ended up as a shootout? In other words, if they had a very strong vehicle that could withstand being rolled better than a sedan, or withstood being rammed, what would have happened then? It's also possible that the authorities would have said, okay, we can't ram another F-150. We can't, it would be as dangerous to us as to them. So you could have a totally different outcome just if they'd bought a different vehicle. But maybe they didn't have enough money for another F-150 kind of thing. If they bought it, I don't know if he stole it. We still don't know that. Okay, I'm going to go through your comments before I sign off here, probably just for another 5 minutes. I want to thank you guys for the super chats. Thank you very much. Good to have you still in chat, Sharon Lynn, another mod. Ashley Shelton says, very smart, Nick. Thanks a lot. Misunderstood says, I would be on a beach in Cuba if it were me. Yeah, that does make sense. Go on a boat, right? Zircon, she got what she wanted, in my opinion. Pooh's blustery day, treats for Timmy. Thanks a lot for that. I see you've also got a dog in your profile there. Timmy's, I think, lying on my bed. Do you think he shot her? Jenny asks. I don't think so. I think there would be blood spatter on his white shirt. I think you would have seen that because it was really at close quarters. Eric, I also think there would have been charges by now if he did. I think there would have been charges. Eric Olmork, criminals that escape are caught within days. They have a good escape plan, but no plan to escape. No plan to stay on the run. Most of them plan day by day. It's quite interesting comparing this fugitive scenario to Brian Laundrie. Brian Laundrie wasn't found for like a month. Situation was completely different because he probably committed suicide early on. But if you think about it, he's not moving, he's not in a car, he's not out in public, he's not in the urban fabric. That's why they don't find him for such a long time. Bear in mind, the authorities were searching an area where he sort of was, and they still didn't find him. So that's what you get when you go off grid and you're prepared to suffer. But that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to have they wanted to live and be happy and enjoy themselves. They didn't want, the jail was the suffering. They wanted to get away from that. So I don't know if they had a very long-term thing going on. I think, and I don't think self-discipline, sacrifice, and pain and suffering is something that criminals know very well how to deal with. Let's just go through some of your last comments here. Amy Hall, what is a good source to get information on this case? Besides me. Grizzly True Crime is quite a good YouTube source. I got a lot of this information from a very comprehensive article from the Associated Press. I think I can maybe provide it here. I think I can maybe provide it here. The article, sorry, I don't know what is going on. I'm just maybe talking too much. The article is titled Inside the Manhunt for an Escaped Murder Suspect and Jailer by Michael Balsamo, dated May 11th. I'll put a link in the chat. That is a pretty good source. And another source that I found quite good was, I think, the Daily Mail, which just shows some photos. Casey White reveals what he and jail lover did during 11 days on the run. There's this article, colleagues had voted prison guard Vicky White Employee of the Year for a 5th time, and she was said to be honored this week before she went on the run with her intimate lover. So I'll put a link to that. That's quite a good source. Where's that other one? Casey White reveals. Okay, so that's that. How's that? Okay. Eric Olmark says, I agree they did not wait with love until in a safe house, straight to the motel room. In my opinion, that became their downfall. Yeah, I mean, staying at that motel for more than a day was a big mistake. Ashley Shelton says Casey was indeed pulled out first. Thanks, Amy. I hope you find that interesting. Terry Dean says, seems like neither of them had friends they thought would help. No place that was familiar or safe to go to. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing is, did they have much of a fabric of people or a network? Did they have much of a network that they could rely on? And it seems like they didn't. Being a fugitive is a lonely life as well. Short-term planning, yeah. Donna McLeod, I like these live chats. They really get me thinking more. I'm not explaining good enough, but thanks, Nick and mods and everyone. Okay, so I'm gonna get Timmy to. Whoa. Okay, I'm gonna get Timmy to wave goodbye to you guys. I think I'm gonna take him for a walk in about a couple of minutes. Sun's about to come up here. In fact, the sun's coming up in about 30 minutes. So I might take him for a quick little walk. So Timmy says goodbye. Timmy also says, can you see his clapping hands? He says, thank you for the super chats. Thanks a lot for that. Welcome to some of the new members, and hope you found this deep dive interesting. I hope you've learned something that you didn't know before, information that you didn't know. I had to do a little bit of research to sort of put it together. So I hope you found it interesting, but also bringing it together and interpreting it and saying, this is likely what was going on in their psychology, and this was likely the true dynamic. And I think a big part of the dynamic was sex and also escapism. I think escapism is a big theme here. It might sound ridiculously derivative because they were fugitives, but they were trying to escape the humdrum of their lives and certain other things. And that's something that we sometimes need to address as well. How realistic are we in our escapism? Do we need to think about that? Do we need to plan that a little bit better? So, for example, if you're going on a holiday, it's quite a silly example. If you're going on a holiday, or if you are going to do a exercise event or a bicycle race or whatever, that is escape. Nevertheless, you need to plan in a way that's realistic and not get so caught up in the fantasy of the escape that you don't do that. And that can lead to some unexpected disasters or unexpected problems. So even in the middle of your fairy tale, even in the middle of your escape, don't forget to plan. When you plan for success, how does that saying go? Okay, Timmy, I'll put you down. Tell me what you're doing, eh? How does that saying go? I think it's from Gary Player. Timmy, I'm going to have to put you down. I'm going to leave you guys with this quote. Plan. It's not quite the quote I'm looking for. We create success or failure on the course primarily by our thoughts. That's not the quote I'm looking for. How does that saying go? If you don't plan your success, you plan your failure. Something like that. You guys know what I'm getting at? That's it, yeah. Oh, Benjamin Franklin, okay. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, absolutely. And so in this case, it's not a case that they failed to plan, but that they failed to continue to plan, and they failed to plan adequately. So I suppose you could add to that, if you fail to plan adequately, you're planning to fail nevertheless, right? Okay, cool. Thanks a lot for Thought Criminal. You saved me there. Jenny Friedman says, please hit the thumbs up button, share and subscribe, show the love. Okay, so I'm done. It's almost a 3-hour live. Thanks again for the super chats. Thanks for a really great session. Some really good comments, questions, interactivity. It's really been good seeing you guys here. A couple of new faces. Paris Ritchie says, you know what they say about proper prior planning, that's for sure. Good night, guys. Sleep well, take care, stay safe, and don't forget that planning. Okay, see you guys next time.